Hello, everybody, and I want to welcome you all to another episode of RG22 Outdoor Adventures. And today I am going to be building a grandma style crankbait that I'm going to use for musky fishing out of a plank of cedar wood that I bought from the lumber section at Home Depot. And as you can see, what I've done in all my other videos, I'm kind of following the same format here, making these lures. Drawing the initial shape with a pencil after everything was all prepped. And then when I'm finally satisfied with how the shape is, I then go over it with a Sharpie. And you'll see I'll have the basic shape out drawn with the Sharpie. And basically this is how the lure is going to look after it's cut. Alright, so after the lure is all drawn out and outlined with the Sharpie marker, I started measuring out where I wanted to place the diving lip. And as you can see, I've found the place where I want it and got the line drawn. And then I'm going to take my calipers that I had the same size as the acrylic that I'm going to be using for the diving lip, and I'm going to make my marks, and then I'm going to draw the lines parallel again. And then from there, it's going to get cut out on the bandsaw, and then I'll cut the diving lip slot out. So let's get over to the bandsaw, and let's get this lure cut out. So we'll see you over there. All right, so after the lure is all drawn out, it's time to bring it over to the bandsaw and start cutting. And obviously what I'm doing now is I'm cutting along that black line. And when I've got the basic shape of the body cut out, that's when I'm going to go, that's where we start working on the diving lip. And before we make that cut, it's always good to make sure that the table is level with the blade. And I did that. I made sure that it was level by using a square, made sure everything was square. And once all that was done, that's where I started cutting out the diving lip. So just remember, before you start cutting the diving lip, make sure that you have your blade and table leveled out, which is what I did prior to doing this. And here I am cutting out the diving lip. No need to hurry. Take your time and just enjoy some of the time-lapsed footage of cutting the diving lip. And after that's all done, it's over to the belt sander, and we'll get the lure sanded out. And after that, it's carving and painting. So at this point in the build, I already did the sanding on the belt sander and drilled out the eyes, and I got the basic shape. And what I'm doing here, I'm actually drawing out the center line that's going to guide me when I'm doing my sanding, when I'm doing my cutting at the top for the through wire. And then it's also going to guide my where I'm going to put the chamfer, how far from the center I'm going to put the chamfer lines, and then also guide me with the sanding and everything else on this lure. So it's a very crucial part of this build is establishing the center line. And as you can see, you do it on the top of the lure, and then you take it all the way around on the bottom, and you do it there as well. So after I've got the lures all cut out and sanded and the center line drawn, I'm drawing out the chamfer lines, and these are going to be the guides that I'm going to use when I'm carving. So as you've seen in other videos that I've done, you'll see that I drew the edges, and then I draw a line down the middle of the lure, on the side of the lure actually, and then I carve within those lines. And after all that is done, we then take it over to the vise, where we're gonna then cut out the center with a saw, and we'll get all that drilled out for so that we can actually start putting in our through wire, and then we'll get it all sanded down on the vise as well. Well, we're really moving along here on this. Um, so after I've gotten all the sanding, the carving, and everything done like that on this lure, it's time to put it into the vise, and I'm gonna cut the top of the lure for my through wire. And as you can see, I have a line that I drew down the side that's gonna kind of guide how deep I want to go with this. And basically, it's also going to guide on when I'm bending the wire for my through wire for the line tie and hook hangers and everything. But again, just take your time. There's no hurry. It's not a race. You want to make sure everything's good and accurate, because it's actually what's going to help the lure to run proper as well, along with the proper alignment of the diving lip, and then proper alignment of the through wire going through the center of the lure. And as when I'm done cutting this initial slot, I'm going to use a larger saw to actually enlarge the slot to make so that the wire that I'm using will actually fit in there. And I think the wire I'm using is a 0.51 inch wire. It's pretty thick and it's pretty heavy, so it should be perfect for these lures. Okay, so here I am doing some sanding on this lure, and we're going to sand the tops in the back, the front, and also on the bottom and on the very front of the lure, as well as the very back of the lure. And a lot of this rounding out, it takes the corners away, and sometimes it allows actually the finish to actually adhere a little bit better, so you don't have very thin areas where the corners are. And as you notice, I was using I use a piece of masking tape, but Gorilla Tape works a lot better, or duct tape, over the sandpaper, and it gives you a lot longer time to work. The paper lasts a lot longer, and it doesn't break as much, especially if you're using duct tape or Gorilla Tape or something like that. It shouldn't break at all. But anyways, here's me just doing a lot of sanding, and actually all the way up until we start putting a finishing coat on the lure and doing the wire and lead holes and everything. It's all sanding and making sure everything looks good. Okay, so at this point in the build, I'm going to start working on the diving lip, and as you can see, I'm kind of using a couple templates that I have for circles and trying to figure out how big I want the diving lip and things like that. So here's a piece of acrylic that I have some blue tape over that you can buy at Home Depot. And I've got the lure on it, and what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to try to see how long the lip should be and all that good stuff. And so I'm kind of getting everything laid out here before I actually draw it out and cut it. this project takes a little bit of time to do to make sure everything looks good and is correct. If it's not correct and the diving lip isn't centered or anything like that and symmetrical, the lure isn't going to run right. And no matter how you tune it, it's not going to be right, and you might as well just scrap it and start over again. So take your time on this step before you cut the lip out and glue it in. And then when we're done with this diving lip, we're going to take it over to the bandsaw and get it all cut out. Get it sanded down on the belt sander, and then actually sand the sides down with sandpaper and a leather strap to polish it all out and make it look really nice. Okay, so in this part of the video here, I'm going to start cutting out the diving lip, and basically all I'm doing is cutting straight along the line that I made on both sides, and then it's going to go over to the belt sander. That's where I'm going to do the final shaping and sanding. Use some sandpaper, get the edges all nice and smooth, and then finally polished up with one of my leather strops. After all this is done, at that point you could get it glued into the lip slot that you cut in when you were on the bandsaw the last time. The one thing I would recommend is I tried 30-minute epoxy on this, and it was just extremely difficult to have the diving lip stay in place. And basically, if you just set it and just ignore it, you're going to be off center, and the lure's not going to run right. So my take on this would be use some 5-minute epoxy, or even like a gel type super glue, and that should give you a little bit more working time to get the lure straightened out with a quick set. Okay, so let's start drilling out some eye sockets here. So what I did was I took a 1/2-inch Forstner bit and drilled out the sockets right and left side, and after that you're done, and you just keep moving on and working on the lure. Okay, so basically in this part of the video right here, I'm just trying to figure out where I want to put the very first lead weight. So just try to figure out where the exact balance point on this lure is. And basically what I'm doing is I'm taking my hand very loosely, just gripping the lure and kind of just letting it slide and figuring out where the lure is just going to kind of slide straight down. And where it does that, that's where I'm going to put my first lead weight. And then from there, I'll probably go right, left, or however I'm going to do it, just to see how I'm going to weight it. And then I just mark it with with some kind of punch or whatever, just to mark where I want to put the lead weight. And then once we figure all that out, it's probably a 1/2-inch Forstner bit, and then you drill that through, and then you're done. And then you just fill it up with your molten lead for your ballast. So after I've got the lead holes all marked out, I take my 1/2-inch Forstner bit and I start drilling a hole for the lead. And basically I just want to make sure here that I've got this perfectly centered, and I'm going to use my punch again to make sure that it's there. So use it as a guide for the Forstner bit. But I think I also decided I would need probably an extra lead hole, so I put one closer to the front just to kind of help the lure balance out a little bit better and to sit nose down just a little bit more. And once the lead holes are all drilled out, obviously you fill them up with some lead. Now I have a lead pot that I use, or you can just kind of take a ladle or something, put some lead in it, heat it up, melt it, and then pour it in. And don't forget, once the lead is filled, you may have to add or subtract lead based on however the lure is going to balance out when you do your testing. When it's all done and everything's perfect, then you can fill it either with super glue and baking soda, or you can use epoxy and micro balloons, or whatever else you use to seal wood. So after that, we're just going to move on to where we can start actually sealing it, putting the wire in, and painting it. Okay, so as you can see, I did quite a bit off camera. I got the through wire in, um, got the lead holes drilled, glued the weight in, glued the lip in, put some pins in, and then put a coat of finish over it. So now I think the fun's going to start, and this is where we're going to start seeing the lure come alive. And yep, we're going to start painting. So base coat's going to be white. So we'll get all that mixed up and we'll start getting this paint. So after I put this the two-part epoxy clear coat on, got it all sanded down so it's all ready to paint, and finally we can actually start putting this white base coat on, and the color I'm using is opaque white. And then from there, obviously, we're going to add colors, and this opaque white's going to allow those colors to pop that we start adding afterwards. So here we are putting on our very first base coat of white. Okay, so the next color after our base coat of white is going to be probably another base coat of wicked golden yellow. And like I said, this is going to cover the entire body, and then after that we're going to get started on the scales. Okay, so the really exciting part of this build is I'm going to be painting scales on this, and I've got this purple mesh that I bought from Hobby Lobby. And then I think the first color is going to be gold, and I'm going to paint all the scales, the entire lure gold. And from there you'll at least see the yellow coming through the gold. And then from there we use different darker colors to shade, and depending upon which way I'm going to start painting the scales, which way the airbrush is, the paint's going to layer on that part. So we'll explain it as we go. Okay, so this is Wicked Metallic Bronze, and how I'm going to be painting this is it's going to be painting from the back to the front, and having the airbrush just kind of pointing towards the front, and I'm going front, back to front, back to front, back to front, and that's going to just pull all the paint up towards the at the head of the scales, leaving some of that gold in the back. Okay, so the next color up on this build is going to be a burnt umber, and I'm going to start spraying this across the top and down the sides a little bit just to kind of get some shading. The style is going to be the exact same way that I did the bronze. I'm going to start from the back and work my way to the front. That way, at least that way, that paint hits the back, hits that front part of the scales, and it pulls there, and then you can start seeing the gold, the bronze, and then finally you start seeing the burnt umber. And this is going to be done all the way across the top, like I said, down the sides and on the head as well. And if I remember, I kept this kind of thin, so well, let's see how this goes. Okay, so now I'm gonna start. Now I'm gonna use transparent black, and I'm just gonna lightly mist that down across the top, and then just let the overspray hit the sides, and we should have a really nice shading down the side, and then you should be able to still see the scales on the top, even through this transparent black. Well, this is a pretty exciting part of the build. This is the unveiling of the scales. Taking all the clips off, going to get the mesh off, and then we'll get to see what the layers of paint with the scales look like. And from looking at it, it looks like there's going to be some really killer shading. And I think if I remember correctly, I also decided to add some black, to add a little bit more of the transparent black right down the top of the lure, and then letting that overspray go down the sides, and it really made for a killer shading on the lure. After that, this is where we're going to move on to painting the gills and the fins, and then finishing up the head, and then putting on the eyes. So let's continue watching and seeing how the lure is made. And if you guys like all these videos, don't forget to like them, share, and then subscribe to videos, and keep watching, okay? Thank you very much, and let's see how the rest of the lure goes. Okay, so this is probably going to be the most complicated part of the build, and this is where I'm going to start making the gills and the fins, and then finishing the shading of the head. As you can see, I made a template, and the template is basically set to the lure. I have a slit for the diving lip, so everything is set perfectly. When I go back and forth on either side, everything's should be the same. For the outline, what I'm using for the gills and for the fins, I'm going to be using Wicked Jet Black. And basically, as you can see, we're just taking the template, and I've got the gill plates, and we'll get the gills painted on both sides. I have another template that I use for the fins. And then after that, it's shading in the head. And for the shading, I used all the colors that I used on the body of the lure, but spread them out really thin so that way I can shade over them. And then after that, I took a color shifting metallic paint and sprayed the head with that to kind of dull stuff out a little bit and give it a pearly type effect, and then sprayed that over down the back and top of the lure. And then at the very end, I painted the belly pearl white, and then also painted the walleye white mark at the back of the lure as well to kind of resemble a walleye. And then put a 2-coat epoxy on it, and actually that's the rest of the lure. Oh, and then the eyes. So the eyes I shaded with the Wicked Jet Black, And then I took some Mylar, super glued that into the eye socket, and then I took a glass bead or a half dome and epoxied that over the Mylar, and you get this really cool reflective eye that reflects really neat in the light and in the water. So with all that, after this, the lure's basically done, and let's get it out there and see how it's going to work in the water. Okay, here's this one. Oh, that reeled in nice and straight. Let's try this one more time. All right, so you guys can see how this swims. If you guys can see that lure right there. Okay, there it is. Has a really nice, slow, lazy wobble to it. I'd say if you're just reeling these in normally, like this, maybe you can jerk it, let it rise slowly, and reel it back in, give it a jerk, let it rise. It needs some tuning. They all want to go to the right for some reason. Every single one. So let's move this one to its right. Try this one more time. Moving the lure to the right. Let's see if this helps. Runs a little straighter. No. I'm gonna bend it the other way. Yeah, I'm gonna bend it the other way. Okay, so we want to move it to the other way. That's kind of extreme, but we'll see what happens. Hopefully there's some resistance to it, and it resists the movement of the lure. Let's see. It runs a little bit better. Oh, much better. Let's try it again. Super fast retrieve. Let's see what happens. Now it wants to go the other way. But like I said, a steady retrieve. It runs nice and straight. Nope, it's kind of going off to the side again. Yeah. All right. Just a hair. Nope, a hair to the other side. Hair this way. Not so much, just a hair. There. Now let's try that. Okay, I think that's better. One last cast. And that's going straight. We got it. Okay. So these lures need a lot of tuning. Let's try it again. Yep. Wow, that ran pretty good. All right. Let's get our thumbnail. We'll call it a day.